Sae'Von Springer is the owner and founder of Native Assets. Any views expressed by Sae'Von or his guest are their own thoughts and opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. Any guest appearance by representatives of Web3, NFT, crypto, or any other kind of organization does not constitute an endorsement by Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be mistaken as financial advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult a qualified professional when considering any investments of any kind. A lot has changed over the past decade. The mobile revolution led to the app revolution, which led to the surge of social media, which paved the way for streaming giants like Netflix, YouTube, and Twitch. For some, the changes were too much to handle. Others ignored the changes altogether, failing to adapt. A select few recognized the turning tide and put in the hours needed to master the new era. Today's guest is one of those few folks, having found a way to creatively and strategically align with all these convergent technologies to create one of the most dominant media groups around. In fact, they've even made the Inc. 5000's list as the third fastest growing media company in the US, ranking number 403 overall. But there is a twist here, and it involves virtual humans. Now, at this point, I'm super off script, but there's a lot to unpack here. And so today joining us is co-founder and CEO of Offbeat Media Group, Shep Ogden. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Awesome. Thanks, Sae'Von. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you here. So we were already chopping it up for like 30 minutes offline for a recording. I was like, man, we got to go ahead and jump into this because you're giving a lot of games. So if you could, kind of just quick overview of what Offbeat is, why you started it, and what you all do there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we started Offbeat really as this way of tapping into internet culture. And we own and operate a brand called Humor on Instagram. HUMOR has nearly 4 million followers. And that really helped us stay in touch with like where everything was going and then had brands start reaching out to us. That's really where we started this thing. We started in college and it was all around internet culture, meme culture, and like how we could monetize that and how we could help brands tap into that. Over the years, the business has really, really grown. Now we do still sit at this intersection, like helping brands understand where the internet's headed. But we've really started aggressively, growing our roster of assets is the way I like to say it. We have over 30 brands now, in addition to Humor, that reach, tens and tens of millions of people every single month on platforms like Snapchat and TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. But a few years ago, we really got this interesting idea kind of surrounding, a brand like Humor, which is like a faceless brand, and it's a publisher is what we like to call it. And then we have creator-led brands. An example is Excuse Me What is the name of a show that we have that has over 1 million followers across the internet. And that has a creator attached to it. And we started getting this idea of like, how do you kind of combine those two things? And we came up with the idea of, like a virtual influencers. Like you can build a brand around a persona, except this time it is, it's computer generated, it's animated. It is something that you have a lot more security in the long term over, because of course, like we value our hosts of our shows very well, but also at the same time, like they might have other aspirations in the near future. If you bring to life a virtual human or a virtual influencer, it's IP that we own. It's like a new age Disney is really how we like to think about it.
And what was it in particular that brought this to mind when you were like, hey, what we're doing right now already works? Some people trying to get 10,000, trying to get 100,000. Y'all have tens and tens of millions. So what was it that you saw that gave you the conviction to say, hey, virtual influencers are the way to go?
Well, so we were doing a ton of work in the music industry, and so much work where like we had the opportunity of blowing up dozens of some of the biggest artists in the world right now, and it was really, really cool. Like, we were able to build a big business doing that, and we decided like, man, we should be launching our own record label. We should be launching our own management company. And so we started looking at how would we do this, and we instantly started loving business models or music models like Marshmellow or Daft Punk or these kind of anonymous artists that we thought we could really help explode. Because we heard one time there's a rumor that maybe there's 6 different people behind Marshmellow whenever he's performing in Dubai on Saturday, London on Sunday, and Vegas on Monday. There's likely not one person behind that. And we got really excited about that idea because we saw it as a business, not just a person. And that's one of the things we found like in our days of working with some of the biggest influencers in the world is like, as they get bigger, they have more opportunities, which makes them slightly less reliable whenever you think about it from a business standpoint. And so being able to build an entity like a Marshmellow was really exciting to us. And we started diving really deep into that. And then a lot of us, my co-founders and I were big fans of the Gorillas. And Gorillas was like this whole other like era of that. And so we started looking at virtual artists as an idea. And that's really like where this whole idea started. The next thing you know, we realized, well, we're making all this money by creating this content with faces, influencers as the face of the shows. We should be doing this with avatars. Like we should be doing this with virtual influencers. Like instead of building a show that is hosted by a human, like let's build a show that's hosted by an avatar. Like our first virtual influencer, our first big one is Zero. Zero is our first avatar, and he's now the face of 4 shows across Snapchat, generating meaningful revenue. And instead of us having an outside host do that, it's our IP doing that. And that's really like what kind of gave us that idea, was just the ability to have that personification behind that a human has, right? Like you can really attach yourself to the identity behind a person. Like we see that all the time with like Joe Rogan's an example, right? Like you see that all the time behind like celebrity stars, athletes. And you don't see that as much with publishers. Like humor is so much more of a broad topic. And so we really wanted to tap into that. And that's where it came from, is we wanted to tap into that. And that's where the idea for virtual influencers came from for us.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because even if I think back to, let's go back 50, 60, 100 years, there were a lot of brands and their representatives or their logos, their mascots were often characters, right? Like I think about Warner Brothers, and I can't remember if it was a frog or somebody, but he had like a cane, and he used to do this thing where he would walk along the side of the street, you know what I'm talking about? And like that is what was associated with Warner Brothers for such a long time. And same thing there, like sure, it's a character you look at, but it's not a person. And so over time, this character, they can change what they look like. They can have a different animator for it. And so there's still something that's to go into creating it. But there's no dispute that Warner Brothers owns that free and clear. And anytime they needed the little frog with the cane to do a song and dance for them, they can make it happen because they own it. And so sitting here talking to you about it is almost interesting. It's funny to me that more people haven't really thought about it. And there are some out there. And funny enough, that's actually a good segue to the virtualhumans.org website. When did y'all start that up? Because I imagine this had to be around a similar time, but maybe y'all were doing that for so long and was like, yo, this is the move here, or did y'all start that after you realized it was the way you wanted to go?
Yeah, we started that after. So what we did was like I'll define a virtual influencer really quickly. Because the difference between a virtual influencer and a brand mascot, it's very similar, and some of the asset creation is also similar. But a virtual influencer is its own identity. So like they're talking as if they're a first person. Your typical brand mascot talks as if they're a brand, and they talk for the brand. Whenever you think about a virtual influencer, they're living on social media and they're engaging with fans as if they're a human. And so that's whenever we get really excited about it, because we're building something that has its own identity that connects with fans. Brand mascots are really just to be a face of a brand and to be that asset. So they are similar, but that's sort of the slight difference. In 2019 is when we started virtualhumans.org, and it really came from our just incredibly deep dive into this space. We were so fascinated by it. We were so interested in it. We knew it was going to be massive. It is quickly growing. And there was a ton of press on the space. Little Michaela, Hatsune Miku from Japan, like there were different VTubers and different virtual influencers that had really gotten big at this point. But it was all covered at the same 3 virtual influencers. It was all covered by like TechCrunch, Forbes, Business Insider, et cetera. And there was nowhere to actually dive into the industry. It was like everything was surrounding these big ones. You couldn't actually learn. You couldn't learn how this stuff was being done. You couldn't learn who the players were. And so we were like, wow, this is an opportunity to really just like archive and document this entire space. Like we want to become the home for this space, where instead of finding out about it on TechCrunch, or maybe you do find out about it on TechCrunch, whenever you want to go deeper, you couldn't go anywhere to go deeper. So we built that resource. We built what started as basically an encyclopedia or like a wiki of all of the virtual influencers and virtual avatars out there, then became more of a news resource and a research resource where we're dropping insight pieces. And now it's grown into being the number one website for this entire industry. Like if anyone's interested in virtual influencers, they usually know about virtual humans, and we've usually met them at this point. So for us, it really just became a way of trying to own and help document this industry.
I think that speaks a lot to y'all's testament of just understanding the whole user journey. And what I mean by that is, it's when someone is creating a franchise or a show, you have to think of so many moving parts. You have to think about what is the concept, what's the anchor of this franchise, what do we want the tone to be, and then you really have to get in the mind of who is it that we think is going to watch this. And creating something like virtual influence is a step y'all didn't have to go. Y'all could have just created a document internally and maybe it's like, hey, we're going to have all of this information here. But that's dope that you then said, hey, we can actually use this as another opportunity to spin up another franchise as y'all started doing those interviews with the virtual influencers. And when I first got to the site and I was researching, I was confused at first because I was like, damn, did they create all of these? Because the access y'all had gave me that impression at first. And I was like, man, these folks are busy. Not that y'all aren't busy, but I was just really trying to comprehend, like, how did they build all of these damn things out? And, how are they not like just known everywhere for each of these things? And then I started to realize, like, oh, they're putting this all in one place so you can really get up to speed. And they have like the direct line of access to these different influencers. So I'm curious, when you all Brood, is it Brud or Brood? They were one of the.
I think it's Brud. I think it's
okay.
Brud.
All right, Brud. So correct me if I'm wrong, but they basically were a company, and they spun up with the sole intention almost of developing one or two core avatars and focusing on them. But didn't they get acquired by Yuga Labs?
Or by Dapper Labs.
Dapper Labs is who acquired them.
Yeah, and they I don't know too much about it, but it looks a bit like it was an acqui-hire. I know some of their team was quite talented in the world of like DAOs, and so now they're like Dapper Collectives, which is basically leading all of Dapper Labs' DAO platform that they're building to help people build DAOs. So Trevor was the founder of Brud, and I know he started Friends of Benefits, one of the leading DAOs.
And didn't know that.
And so so I think it was a bit of an acqui-hire because they really wanted that talent in their team. And Little Michaela is their first virtual influencer. Little Michaela is really an interesting first pilot, right? Like he kind of built a DAO around Little Michaela. So I don't think they've done that yet, but something tells me that's what they're thinking a lot about. That's something they're likely going to do at some point in the near future. So yeah, they were the first big Americanized leader in the space, and they did get acqui-hired. I'm not entirely sure by Dapper. I saw that it was an equity only deal, which usually leads to an acqui-hire.
Okay. And thank you for that context. I feel like that's another telltale sign that you've been doing this a while, and you're like, it wasn't a straight acquisition. It was acqui-hire. There's a difference in, because those are nuances.
I would have loved for them to get acquired for like $500 million, right? And I'm not saying it was a failed acqui-hire because Dapper is one of the most incredible companies in the world. And like, I'm sure like they got a great deal. So I don't mean anything negative by it, but yeah, like we're definitely looking for big signs in the industry, people raising large amounts of money, people selling their company for large amounts of dollars, anything like that. It's just like really great and positive for everyone in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Like we don't view, sure, in a world like people might compare Brud as a competitor to us, but like we don't necessarily view it that way because the world is so small right now. This entire industry is so small. So it's like we're cheering on most of the people in the industry, hoping that they blow it up, because if they blow it up, then that just opens up opportunity for us. That opens up exposure for us. So I think a lot of the industry is like that right now. Like we know most of the founders at virtualhumans.org. We're all pretty open about like, we just want to see this entire thing succeed.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely the vibe and energy that I got from you and from Chris when I met him, and just all the energy that comes off of Offbeat is this like, hey, we want to raise these ships up together, and there aren't that many people really innovating in the space. And for people who may not have seen it, I'll make sure to leave a note in the description, a link to it. But what you all have built with Zero, and there's a couple of questions I want to get into just about like some of the IP stuff and how that's all handled. But could you walk people through a little bit of the process of how you all put that together? Because when I look at what they're doing, my understanding, at least on the surface, it's very different from something like, a Mecha, I forgot, Teflon Saga, or even Little Michaela, because I don't believe those virtual influencers can exist in real time the way that Zero can. And that is like a order of magnitude difference in what you can actually achieve, and even the speed and the flexibility of what a virtual influencer can do when they can actually jump on the Zoom call with us and talk with us in real time, versus you still have to go script everything out, render it, process it, and then hope that it was exactly what you wanted to do. If not, scrap it and have to redo it. So can you shed a little bit of light on that process and some of the advantages and some of the, quote unquote, drawbacks that come with going the route that you all went?
Absolutely. I mean, you're spot on with that. I think the only difference is I will call it. I believe Teflon Sega is starting to do some real time live streams,
Okay.
which is cool.
He may have seen
But
Nexus, huh?
yeah, yeah. So he is doing some of that, but in general, yeah, a lot of people in the space, they spend so much time on content creation that with virtualhumans.org, we have a lot of brands reach out that want to partner with virtual influencers, and so we'll try to connect them with virtual influencers. And we started talking to some of these teams, and they said like for them to create a 1 or 2 minute video was going to cost them $10,000 or $20,000. That was what their cost was going to be. So
Sheesh.
they'd have to charge more on top of that. And when we realized like for social media, that's just not scalable. If it costs you $20,000 to create one asset, like it's just not going to be scalable. So after we raised money from Mark Cuban, like our entire goal of that investment was to fuel that into how do we build out the tech to power these avatars in real time. We hired an incredible virtual tech director, Sam, that had been doing that in his own time, and we brought him in, and he really helped us pioneer a lot of what we're doing now with Zero. And so that's it. It's real time animation. So like we don't have a single animator on our team. Like everything we're doing is we're taking motion capture data, we're cleaning it up in real time. Where a typical animation studio would have 7 people cleaning up that data to make sure it looks good in the end, and it takes a lot of time. We build all that basically we build all that cleanup in real time. We automate it. So we're able to take that motion capture data and we're able to output a really high-end polished asset, basically, either in real time like you said, on a Zoom call, or for a Snapchat video or for a YouTube video. It's just very, very quick, and it takes the same amount of time it would for you or I to film ourselves. Except of course avatars are a bit more scalable than that even. But whenever it comes to the actual animation, that's how we think about it. And the pros of that are our content creation costs are really low. Our ability to tap into something like culturally relevant is instant. Zero spoke at Cannes in France for the Cannes Lions Festival. He spoke at NFT NYC. He spoke at VidCon. He spoke at South by Southwest with Mark Cuban. Like he's been able to tap into these places because he's able to have these real time conversations, and that's something that no one else has really been able to do with this caliber of polish. Other people can power an avatar in no time, but the level of polish that comes with our animation is what we're really, really proud of. There are some negatives, though, to your point. I mean, and some of those are just like we're limited to what we build into the system, like to power in real time. So, if we haven't done something already, like you can get a quite more imagination if you actually animate something, like hand animate something. It might cost 30 to 100 hours worth of time to hand animate that, but it can be really incredible and really impressive. We have to go and spend, however many hours to build that animation into that real time system. And then now once it's built in, we can use it over and over and over and over. But that's some of the drawbacks is like we always have to like really pro con and balance, like, is this actually worth adding into the system? Is this just a waste of time? Are we going to use this a lot? And so because we might not use it a lot, we might not actually build it in. And so you miss out on a few of the functionality that if everything was a one-time use case, then it might be more unique and more different every single time, considering you're only going to get to use it once. But because we like to reuse everything we build, it's a bit more scalable for us. I think that's sort of the drawbacks. We miss out on some of what we'd like to build, possibly.
Well, to me, those trade-offs seem worth it, though, because even if from a psychology standpoint, if somebody wants to feel more grounded or more connected to that virtual influencer, having a constant or persistent of like, hey, I know this is Zero's home base, like this is his environment. Just like if this house is not going to change every time I see you sitting in it, nor is the one behind me. And so I think that while, you can do some really cool stuff with animation, and when everything is digital, it can break that sense of reality because it's so extreme or it's so animated or so over the top that there is that disconnect between like, oh, how do I actually feel connected to Zero as a persistent living entity that exists, to your point, as you said earlier, in its own sovereignty and separate from, he only is there when they put him on the side of a box or on, as a logo somewhere. So that brings me to a question I have about the rights associated with the Zero, because I'm sure we've all seen different sci-fi movies, and I can't remember if iRobot, whether it be the book or the movie, actually got to this point, but there being this eventuality where one day, will AI have their own rights protected like you and I do in the letter of the law? And then what does that mean for the flexibility or the availability of virtual influencers? And so I'm curious, when you all spin this up, what does that look like when you have to establish zero, his own existence, or any other virtual influencer you create, and then the way that the IP rights of what he creates are then funneled down. Like is there a world where Zero has his own bank account where Zero signs the contract, or is it always on behalf of Zero? And I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I'm trying to get to how you all do it now and where you think this might go down the road.
There's definitely a world where Zero, I think we might actually already have one, where Zero has like an Ethereum wallet, right, where he's able to do his own transaction. Nice. So stuff like that's definitely realistic. But I mean, we've gotten pretty heady at how we think about stuff like this, because it's really fun to dive deep into like how you think about virtual influencers and how you think about virtual humans, and that like as they continue to become more and more like artificially intelligent, like when do they get their own rights in a way? But whenever it comes to IP rights, it's really straightforward, because you can just follow like what's been done for the last 100 years, right? So it's like we look at companies like Marvel, we look at companies like Disney who owns Marvel. We look at DC Universe, like how do they own their rights? And like right now, like that's how we think about it. Zero is an Offbeat asset, and so we protect that IP where we're the only people that's able to power it. In the future, there's a world where that IP becomes a bit more decentralized, but I don't think that'll ever go to a world where like anyone could power Zero or create whatever they want with Zero. I don't think we'll do that. I think it's important if you're trying to build like a legacy IP that you have control over it. Mm-hmm. And like for the long term. And so I think there's a world where you give a large community the ability to add value into how we control that IP, whether it's like full control or some control on what we're doing with the IP, but not to give each individual person the ability to control it in their own way that they see fit. And I think that's how we think about it. Like there always has to be some like center hold, whether that center hold is, an elective controlled by a DAO, or whether it is right now a corporation like Offbeat, with myself and my partners making the final say so. But I definitely think that's whenever we think about IP, we think about it like same as you would with Mickey Mouse. Like no one's going to be able to just steal Zero's IP and start creating content with Zero. It has to come through like an approval process at the company.
Yeah, naturally, I was pretty sure that is how it played out. But I think, trying to be devil's advocate here, did you happen to see the Heart Part 5, I think that was, by Kendrick Lamar? It was the music video where he's rapping and his face turns into Kanye West, and it turns into Will Smith, and it turns into some other people. If you haven't seen it,
I haven't seen that. I have to see that.
I'm going to send you the link.
I've been diving into deepfakes so much recently, and so I have to go see that.
Yeah, dude, the shit... It's crazy. It's crazy, the detail. And when I saw it, it was just like, the last few months, I see Nexus come out. And then I see, when they put out the Mid-Journey and the DALL-E 2, and then seeing the stuff they have on the video. And so it really sped up the timeline in my mind of when it's one, cost effective, meaning cheap and accessible for people to utilize these sort of tools and you can do some really amazing creative work with it, but it also calls into question, infringement and ripping somebody's likeness off. And all of these technologies, just like I read in the intro, I'm very confident will eventually converge where you can plug these assets. And I know that the way that some of this stuff works to replicate the voice, you can feed it a few lines of audio, and the more audio that it has available on the internet, the better it can reproduce it. But then it can take your voice and you can insert it into something. And so from your perception, obviously you're closer to a lot of this technology than most people are. What do you see as a timeline for not necessarily, anybody to be able to control Zero, because as we just talked about, that's not really the goal, but for there to be a more autonomous nature of, hey, this is the idea, the Offbeat that you all have for Zero. You hand it to Zero, and then the AI and the machine learning do the work.
Man, no. So we talk about this all the time. So I think the technology is already out there. It's really just about like how you build it properly, like pull all the pieces together. And I can talk about two examples there. One is like you see where the world's going with deepfakes right now. Like deepfakes used to be something that like you had to do in post-processing, and now you can actually, like you just said, like in real time now, you can turn your face into someone else, and you can start being someone else, and you can throw on a synthetic voice. And like the first ever political attack was done in the last month by someone was pretending to be the mayor of Kiev in Ukraine talking to someone from Germany. And it's like, turns out it was a deep fake, but it looked really, really, really realistic. And so this technology is here to power these things in real time. That was still behind, a person behind it. But that's kind of how we think about Zero too, is like a lot of the technology is here to make it more scalable. But we look at our avatars, like we have a voice performer behind every avatar. And we see that for the foreseeable future. Because that's really how you get that human element coming out of it, where we want to have that person behind it interacting with fans, talking to people, creating custom content. But on the flip side, it is an avatar. And so we're looking at ways of exactly what you just said. How do you use a synthetic voice software to plug into a text-to-speech software to power an avatar, right? Where that avatar can be doing 10 times more content, where, a 3-hour live stream is always going to be done by a voice performer. And it really just like frees them up from all the smaller things that like a typical content creator would have to do. Content creators are thinking about Instagram stories, YouTube shorts, Twitter, TikTok, just Instagram posts, YouTube videos, Snapchat videos. They're on all of these platforms. And how can we just kind of segment that down to where like a voice performer is really just focused on like building relationships with fans on a platform like Twitch or on a platform like YouTube, and the rest of that content becomes automated. It's much more generative. Like you mentioned a lot of great tools there that like they're not built necessarily yet to plug into what we're doing, but the tech is getting there where you'll be able to just drop in an idea, drop in a script, and the next thing you know, Zero is just powering doing this content. I don't think you'll ever be able to replace that human element entirely, and I don't think we would actually want to. But that is whenever you think about like all the shoulder content or scripted content, things like that, no, you should be able to have a tool to do that. So that's the type of stuff we're building.
Right on. When you think about what Zero can do at this current moment, and then maybe on the other end of the spectrum of virtual influencers being the ones that do require a lot of pre and post production to come about, how do you see that connecting or influencing just regular people who are content creators? Do you see them cannibalizing market share? Do you see them being another tool that we see regular, everyday humans collaborating with these folks more and more? How do you think that shakes out? Should people, view Nexus as their competition or their ally in this journey?
I think as an ally, I think about it from a perspective of there's so many content creators, like when not one person is really taking market share from the other people. I do envision that some of that attention will move towards virtual creators, like it's already happening. But there's already some companies doing this, and we're really thinking about doing this too. Is like how do we partner with a influencer or celebrity to create an avatar like Zero together, right? Right now, the biggest problem with the creator economy is burnout. Like these people work so hard, they get aboard, they're pulling in $1 million a year, and then they just have no interest, urge in continuing to go. Like they hit a point, and then they're so burnt out, they're so sick of it. They hit a goal, and it's like they're just done. It might not even be that high, right? But they get so burnt out, and so this is a really interesting way of like extending their brand. Like we're talking to some really major creators about like how do we build a Zero in partnership with you, where you hang out with once a month, you hang out with once a week, and you're kind of bringing your audience into this new world. And that's something that gets us really excited and gets the creators really excited, because they're thinking about, how do I avoid burnout? How do I turn this into something bigger than my face? Do I always have to have my face attached to it? Like if you listen to Mr. Beast's podcast, for example, he's really interesting. He says the most productive he could be, period, is if he could be filming 99% of his time and everything else is completely taken care of. But it's like, that's unrealistic, and that's not very fun. If you have to be filming 40 plus hours a week to be at max efficiency, that's really tough. And so he's probably going to do it, just knowing him. But we like the idea of helping someone like that, extend their brand, where they're still creating content, they're still reaching their audience, except it doesn't have to be in that same way.
That's a particularly powerful use case, because to your point, burnout is a thing, and it has been for forever, but particularly in the creator economy, where call it the algorithms, call it, people's appetite for novelty. If you don't deliver on a particular cadence, once you hit a certain point, anything less than that often hurts that person's business if they're thinking about what they do as a business. And obviously, there are pros and cons to that decision. Do I live more of my life, or do I make my life where 99% of it, it's like, imagine if an actor never had breaks between films.
Exactly.
It's like, and so you raise this idea of like an avatar as a service. And that's something that's been more in my mind the last few months as I think about so many of these NFT projects that are coming about, and they came initially as these flat 2D images, and now more and more of them is becoming the default expectation that there should be some 3D file or asset associated with that NFT's art, and allowing people an easy way to animate them. But do you think that that's going to be a trend that really prevails, not just from Offbeat, but maybe once you all show the use case, that then there'll be a light bulb for some people of like, damn, we could just have an avatar do it. It's like there's people who ghostwrite articles for folks on LinkedIn. You have people who ghostwrite music. Why not have somebody, instead of it being like a secret of, oh, it's a ghostwriter, like, no, this is my designated partner, and they do a lot of this content for me, and I pop in every now and again, but that's who you see most of the time. How do you think that functionally works? How involved is the creator in that process at that point?
Yeah, what I was saying is I think there are companies like mine. I think there's other companies out there that are looking to build out new IP with creators. I also think there's companies like Genies that are looking to build IP of you. And I think both of those are really interesting. And I think it will be a bit of a white glove service. I think some creators will get more involved, but that's a bit more of a studio model. And I think a lot of them won't want to give that time. So they'll be partnering with people like us. I also think there's a big world where, NFT projects, I've talked to a ton of NFT projects where they want their IP animated. They want their IP actually engaging with fans, engaging with that community. And so I think they might be a group that want the tools to do it themselves because they know how to speak to their community the best, but like they're going to be using that instead of, their own human face. They're going to want to be using their IP to communicate with the fans. And they're going to be looking for the tools to do that. So I definitely think both creators and companies and brands, like, this is where the world's headed. Like, the world's moving digital, the world's moving to avatars. Like, digital identity is becoming one of the biggest things that people are thinking about. It's also where billions of dollars are being invested right now. And there's no chance that 10 years from now, this isn't like where the world is spending most of its time and money. And the reason for this is that you can just see the trends happening right now. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of people are playing Fortnite as avatars. Hundreds of millions of people are using their Bitmoji daily on Snapchat, or they're engaging and they're interacting as that. Hundreds of millions of people are playing games like Zepeto, or they're using NFTs as their identity online. Like, this is a really Ready Player Me is in the massive one in thousands of games. These are very fast growing phenomenons that like make a lot of sense if you think about it. People have been conditioned for the last decade to just accept this new medium of avatars because of things like Bitmoji. Now, fast forward a little bit, and it is really where the creators are coming out. Like, this will become the messaging medium of the future.
How much of that thesis influenced your decision to grab a mutant ape a few months ago? I saw your announcement on Twitter.
Yeah, so that was a huge thing. Like, I think digital identity is going to be huge. I think, like, my mutant ape, I think that comes from, well, yeah, terrible investment at this point, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to hold it
in the short run. Yeah,
right. In the short run. But like, I'm going to hold it because there's only 20,000 mutants, there's only 10,000 apes, and like, they're the first ones that really built this. I know CryptoPunks before that with the PFP, but like, they really did a great job of cornering this market, and now even owning CryptoPunk. So like, Yuga Labs and Bored Apes, like, they're going to be that supreme. They're going to be the supreme of the metaverse. Whenever you want to show off your Rolex, like, I wear a $300 Apple Watch, right? But like, I own a mutant ape, which is cool to people that like NFTs. And it's like, if you want to have that digital clout, like, that's the type of thing that you want to own. And so whenever I realized there was only a certain amount of them, and I'm a big believer in digital identity, yeah, I went ahead and bought a mutant ape as an investment, as well as a way of showing people that I get it. I think both from a business sense, like, it's actually really helpful whenever I'm in my world and my business, like, someone's saying that I have a mutant ape or a clone or anything like that, like, they know that I'm in this world and that I get it. Like, I know where the world's headed. So it's like, short-term value comes from, yeah, just people understand, like, from business conversations, people, you just brought it up, right? Like, people understanding that, like, I'm in this world and I get it. And like, I'm building a business around digital identity and avatars. And then in the future, it will likely be a really, really good performing asset. I mean, all in all, it's still profitable through all the airdrops they've given me. Yeah.
Hell yeah, you had some phenomenal timing on that before the ApeCoin thing came out. So
Yeah.
last question, just kind of on the NFT front, being somebody who gets it, I think that is an incredible value, particularly when you're in the business world and so many people you might interact with, may not have gone down that rabbit hole yet. Is there anything else that has pulled your attention or your mind share that you've seen in the space that you just think is interesting or is promising in a way that might be unique to that project?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll kind of tie this back to Zero and the Nexus universe. So we dove deep, as you know, we dove deep into Web3 and how that ties into virtual influencers and avatars in the Nexus universe earlier this year. With the bear market and with where we were headed, we decided to not activate Web3 right now, is what we like to say. We decided to not do it today. But it is really interesting. And why I think it's really interesting is, one, because IP like Zero is something that a community can own and control and have governance of and have a piece of and have the upside of, where you can't do that with a human. It's just weird, like it's weird whenever you really start investing in humans. A lot of people are trying to do that with creator tokens and celebrity tokens, but you still got to rely on the human never quitting. And like I said earlier, creator burnout is one of the biggest issues. So giving this control over to a DAO effectively around an avatar like this is really, really interesting to me. But more than anything, I think it also incentivizes fandom better than anything. Like there's a lot of companies coming out right now that I think get really fascinating, because how do you incentivize fandom? How do you build a new Marvel universe? How do you get people excited where they're sharing it with their friends? They're talking about it on social media. And right now you can get rewarded. It might be pennies on the dollar, right? It might be hardly anything, but you can get rewarded because you love this project, because you're engaging, because you're watching the content, because you're sharing it online. You can get rewarded for these type of things. And so I think a lot about that when it comes to stuff like this. Like, how do you incentivize celebrity? How do you build a celebrity through Web3? How do you use tokens? How do you use NFTs? How do you do that to like align those incentives with the fans? And I think that's something that gets me really excited about not just what we're building and where we could take it, but really just this entire ecosystem of like, it just aligns the incentives better than it ever has. I know, I'm sure everyone listening to this can think of this too, but it's like one more reason why I bought my Mutant ape is going back to the club example, the country club example. It's like, it is its own country club. I've been to the Bored Ape group or the Bored Ape, I don't even know what it's called, Expo at NFT NYC or whatever it was. And I met a dozen celebrities that I hung out with and got their phone numbers. And it's just because I had because I was there. Right. It's like, that is something that like is a really interesting exclusive group you get to be a part of. But the coolest thing about that makes it so different is like that membership token is something I own now. I can resell if I'm finding value out of it. Where a country club, you pay them $500,000 up front or whatever you pay them, you never see that money again. Like that's their money from now on. So I think those are the big two things to me, like aligning interest, aligning that fandom, but it's also the same way as like aligning that involvement, because if that community becomes more valuable, then my time and my money investment becomes worthwhile.
I think that's one of the main things that a lot of people don't get, is that optionality of, hey, this was my chip to get in, but I can punch that to get out at some point if I change my mind and things are different down the road. And I foresee that a lot of memberships just by default will make more sense to be NFTs, because somebody can buy and never sell it, which would be exactly how it works right now. But you can align those incentives for participation and then in a way retroactively reward that front end participation. And so, yeah, I think that there's a lot of pasture there. Very last question before we get out of here. If you could give any piece of advice for anybody who is trying to start their own project, or they're trying to be a developer in this space, or maybe they just want to work in this field, what would that be?
I think it is really understand the incentives and like the business model behind what you're doing. I know one of the reasons we pull back on Web3 is because like there was a very clear opportunity in front of us for how we build and grow Zero and how we monetize these avatars. But we saw this really shiny new thing with Web3, which I'm still a huge believer in, but we hadn't found exactly how what we were going to do fit in perfectly yet. And we were trying to almost make it fit. And we were getting just too complicated on how we thought it would work out. So it's like, find something that just really makes sense and understand the economics behind it, like how it's going to make money. And then once you find that, just go validate it as quick as you possibly can, and then you can build upon that. But don't get carried away by like all the exciting things happening or all these fun, like massive fundraisers. Like a lot of things that we're thinking about now is just like, how do the economics make sense? Is this built? Is this something that we could build? And do the economics like at scale, either in the short term or at scale, do they really add up? And like, are people actually going to want this? Because there's so much things happening in the NFT space, for example, Web3 space, for example, that is such a just nice to have. And it's never actually going to be something that like 7 years from now is something that everyone wants. And so if you're trying to build something sustainable, I think thinking a lot about that out the gate of like, is this something the economics make sense and people actually want it? It's not just like a gimmick. That's the best advice I could give, is like just understanding the economics and that there's actually a market for it.
Love it. If you could, Shep, let the people know where they can get in contact with you and how they can work and get in contact with Offbeat or Virtual Humans.
Definitely. My LinkedIn is probably the best place for me. LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm Shep Ogden, ShepOgden on both of those. And then Offbeat.xyz is our website. Virtualhumans.org is our other website. Definitely check out both of those and dive deep. I appreciate it, Sae'Von.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you, Shep. This is great. Talk to you.
Thanks. Talk to you.